He grabbed his wife by the hair, dragging her across the floor of the gala because his mistress stained her own dress. His rival, a titan of industry, embraced her and declared, "You belong to me now. Handle this however you wish. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you." Julian's eyes burned with fury. At the most lavish gala of New York's high society, Evelyn Reed, his legal wife, was being publicly shamed by her own husband, dragged and humiliated before hundreds of judging eyes because of a trap laid by his mistress. Just as she felt her last shred of dignity about to shatter, a powerful man strode into the chaos. He brazenly pulled her into his arms, his voice a low, possessive growl. From that moment, a storm of scandal and revenge was unleashed, igniting a tale of sweet retribution and a shocking power shift that would rock the city's elite to its core. This is a story of high drama where pain, love, and power intertwine, a story you won't be able to put down. The gentle, melodic strains of a string quartet filled the opulent grand ballroom of the Starlight Grand Hotel. As one of New York City's most iconic six-star establishments, it was the crown jewel of Hayes Global. Light from a colossal crystal chandelier rained down, glinting off designer gowns, bespoke tuxedos, and glasses of ruby red Cabernet, painting a scene of breathtaking opulence. Tonight was the 20th anniversary gala of Hayes Global, a monumental event that had drawn the entirety of the city's elite and a swarm of media. Everyone wore a practiced smile, exchanging pleasantries and toasts. But beneath the glittering surface lay a world of cold calculation and the endless, unspoken war for power and status. Evelyn Reed stood quietly in a secluded corner near the soaring French windows, her lonely silhouette a stark contrast to the vibrant celebration. She wore a sapphire blue evening gown she had designed herself. The soft fabric clung to her slender frame, accentuating her porcelain skin and the delicate curve of her collarbones. Her long dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing a graceful neck and a pair of sparkling diamond earrings. She was as beautiful and serene as a classical painting, yet her clear eyes were veiled by a weary resignation. She was Mrs. Hayes, the legal wife of Julian Hayes, the man at the epicenter of the glittering affair. But that title was nothing more than a source of mockery and pain. In 2 years of marriage, she had never received a single warm glance from him. He had married her solely as a tool for revenge against her family, the Reeds, whom he blamed for a corporate catastrophe that had nearly bankrupted Hayes Global years ago. Her gaze drifted unconsciously toward him. Julian Hayes was, by all accounts, an extraordinary man. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that accentuated his tall, powerful build. His features were sharp and chiseled, and an innate, regal authority emanated from his every move. He was raising a glass with business partners, a sensual, glamorous figure in a fiery red dress clinging to his side. That was Chloe Vance, a rising model and his very public mistress. He made no effort to hide their affair, brazenly bringing her to an event of this magnitude, treating Evelyn, his wife, as if she were nothing but air. Evelyn turned away, her hand tightening around her wine glass. She was used to it, used to his coldness, his cutting remarks, his treatment of her as an inanimate, decorative object. Her presence tonight was merely to fulfill the duties of the nominal Mrs. Hayes. "Well, look who's all alone over here." A sickly sweet voice, laced with malice, purred beside her. Evelyn didn't need to turn to know who it was. Chloe Vance had detached herself from Julian and was now gliding toward her, wine glass in hand, a seductive, provocative smile playing on her lips. "Sometimes being alone is for the best," Evelyn replied coolly, wanting nothing to do with her. But Chloe pressed closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper laced with smug satisfaction. "Your dress is lovely, truly. What a shame Julian hasn't even glanced at it once. He told me that shade of blue is far too cold. Just like you. Utterly boring." And Evelyn's lips tightened, her heart clenching as if squeezed by an invisible hand. Seeing her silence, Chloe grew bolder, her hand tracing the diamond pendant on her own neck. "Do you see this? Julian just gave it to me last week," he said, only a vibrant, Fiery red like me is worthy of him. Every word was a needle piercing Evelyn's already tattered self-worth. She took a deep breath, fighting to maintain her composure. Is that so? Congratulations. Aren't you jealous? Chloe giggled, a venomous glint in her eyes. Oh, that's right. A wife in name only. What right do you have to be jealous? With that, Chloe feigned a stumble, lurching toward Evelyn. The wine in her glass slashed not onto Evelyn, but directly onto her own red dress. She then collapsed dramatically to the floor with a theatrical cry, shattering her glass. Ah! Chloe's piercing scream instantly silenced the room. The music stopped. Every head turned toward their corner. Julian reacted first, moving like a lightning strike, his face a mask of thunderous rage. He didn't even look at Evelyn. He rushed to Chloe, pulling her up with a voice full of anxious concern. Chloe, are you okay? Are you hurt? Chloe melted into his embrace, her eyes welling with tears, the picture of a wronged victim. She pointed a trembling finger at Evelyn, her voice breaking. Julian, I just wanted to offer her a drink. I didn't expect. She pushed me. Her accusation hung in the air, damning Evelyn completely. A wave of whispers swept through the crowd, and the gazes that fell upon Evelyn were filled with scorn and contempt. My God! How could Mrs. Hayes do something like that? She must be insane with jealousy. So vicious. Evelyn stood frozen as if struck by lightning. She offered no explanation, knowing it would be useless. In Julian's eyes, she was and always would be the one at fault. As expected, Julian's head snapped toward her, his dark eyes narrowing into cold, sharp daggers. He growled, each word laced with menace. Evelyn Reed, what new game are you playing now? I didn't do it. Evelyn's voice trembled, but she forced herself to stand tall. You didn't do it. Julian let out a chilling, derisive laugh. Chloe is on the floor, and everyone saw it. You dare deny it? He gave her no chance to speak further. He strode forward, his large hand shooting out, and without a moment's hesitation, twisted his fingers cruelly into her carefully styled hair. Ah! A cry of pain escaped Evelyn's lips as a searing pain shot through her scalp. Her body lurched forward, pulled by his merciless force. The entire ballroom fell into a stunned, deathly silence. No one could believe what they were seeing. The CEO of Hayes Global was physically assaulting his wife in the middle of his own gala. Julian was oblivious to the shocked stares. He yanked harder, forcing Evelyn's head down. Apologize to Chloe now. Tears of humiliation streamed down Evelyn's face. She bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. Her last vestige of pride, refusing to let her submit. Her silence only fueled Julian's rage. He began to drag her across the cold marble floor, the expensive fabric of her gown scraping against the shards of broken glass with a sickening sound. He pulled her in front of Chloe and brutally forced her head down. I said, apologize. His voice was the roar of a demon. Evelyn felt her world crumbling. The physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. She looked up through her tear-filled eyes. In his eyes, she saw only pure, unadulterated hatred and cruelty. She knew in that moment that he was stamping out the last ember of her dignity, just as her knees were about to buckle under his brutal force. A voice low, cold, but ringing with an undeniable authority cut through the suffocating silence of the ballroom. Mr. Hayes, laying your hands on a woman. How very brave of you. The voice wasn't loud, but it sent a shiver down everyone's spine. Julian froze, his brow furrowed as he turned to see who had dared to intervene. From the grand entrance, a man was walking slowly toward them. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, and with every step he exuded a natural, regal aura that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. His face was sculpted perfection, with sharp, defined features, a high-bridged nose, and thin, cool lips curved into a slight icy smirk. But it was his eyes that were most captivating. As deep and dark as a midnight ocean, yet as sharp and predatory as a hawk's, making it impossible for anyone to meet his gaze directly. Alexander Sterling. Julian gritted out the name. Another wave of murmurs erupted. Alexander Sterling. the president of Sterling Enterprises, the dominant force in technology and real estate across North America. He was a legend in the business world. Young, brilliant, impossibly shrewd, and most importantly, the fiercest rival of Hayes Global. His presence here at this moment was utterly astounding. Alexander seemed not to hear Julian, nor did he pay any mind to the astonished crowd. His gaze was fixed from the very beginning on the small, pitiful figure being held captive by Julian's grip. His heart felt as if it were being squeezed by a thorny hand. He continued his unhurried advance, each step seeming to land on Julian's last nerve. He stopped directly in front of them, his silence more terrifying than any threat. "Mr. Sterling, to what do we owe this uninvited pleasure?" Julian snarled, his hand still tangled in Evelyn's hair in a foolish assertion of ownership. Only then did Alexander's cold gaze shift to him, his eyes filled with an undisguised contempt. He didn't answer the question. Instead, in a move that stunned everyone, he slowly unbuttoned his expensive suit jacket. He leaned down and tenderly draped the jacket over Evelyn's trembling shoulders, shielding her broken and disheveled state from the world. The lingering warmth of his body and the faint clean scent of cedarwood enveloped her, bringing an unexpected sense of security. Then his hand reached out gently but with unshakable resolve. He began to pry Julian's fingers one by one from Evelyn's hair. His touch was not forceful, but it sent a jolt through Julian, who instinctively let go. Once she was free, Alexander smoothly pulled Evelyn into his arms. He rested her chin on his shoulder, one hand protectively cradling the back of her head, the other securely around her slender waist. A posture of absolute possession and protection. Evelyn was limp in his embrace, her body still shaking from the shock, but the masculine scent and the solid warmth of his chest were strangely calming. "Alexander Sterling, what is the meaning of this?" Julian roared, his face contorted with rage. "She is my wife." The words were a bitter reminder that snapped Evelyn back to reality. She started to struggle, but Alexander's arms only tightened around her. He turned his head, his deep eyes locking with Julian's, his voice as cold as ice, but with each word landing like a hammer blow. "Your wife," he scoffed. "Is this how you define wife, Mr. Hayes?" By dragging her by the hair and humiliating her in front of the world. His question left Julian speechless, his face flushing with anger and shame. Before he could retort, Alexander lowered his head, his lips close to Evelyn's ear. His voice, once so cold, was now unbelievably gentle, yet loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You belong to me now." The possessive declaration made the world stand still. Evelyn's head shot up, her tear-stained eyes wide with disbelief as she stared at the man beside her. Alexander didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on Julian, a silent, defiant challenge. He continued, his tone now filled with an indulgent protectiveness. "Handle this however you wish. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up for you." With that, he didn't spare Julian another glance. He swept Evelyn off her feet and into his arms, ignoring her gasp of surprise and the explosion of whispers from the crowd. He held her close and strode purposefully toward the main entrance, leaving behind a seething Julian, a forgotten Chloe on the floor with a look of utter disbelief, and a 20th anniversary gala that had been irrevocably transformed into a public spectacle. The sudden shift from the suffocating ballroom to the cool night air, combined with the immense emotional trauma, was too much for Evelyn to bear. The last of her strength drained away. Before she lost consciousness, she felt the arms holding her tighten, and a deep, anxious voice echoed in her ear. "Evelyn." Evelyn's eyelids were heavy. She struggled to open them, but even the soft glow from a bedside lamp made her squint. The faint scent of antiseptic mingled with a clean, woody fragrance filled her nose. This wasn't the cold, familiar scent of her room at the Hay Mansion. She slowly sat up, realizing she was in a strange bedroom. The decor was minimalist yet exquisitely luxurious, with a palette of grey and white that created a modern and serene atmosphere. She was wearing a large men's dress shirt, its soft silk brushing against her skin. Underneath she still had on her ruined gown. Memories of the horrifying gala flooded back. Julian's cruelty, Chloe's triumphant smirk, the crowd's whispers, and the warm embrace of the stranger who had saved her. Evelyn looked down and finally noticed a sharp sting in her knee. The fabric of her gown was torn, revealing an ugly scrape from the broken glass. The blood now dried, but still alarming. "You're awake." A deep, warm voice pulled Evelyn from her thoughts. She looked up, startled, to see a figure sitting in an armchair by the bed. The lamp cast a soft light on one side of his perfect angular face. It was Alexander Sterling. He had removed his jacket and tie, and the sleeves of his white dress shirt were casually rolled up, revealing strong forearms and a high-end watch. In his casual state, he radiated a calm elegance, a stark contrast to the imposing, cold-hearted magnate from the gala. In his hands was a first aid kit, and beside him was a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. "Mr. Sterling," Evelyn stammered, a wave of confusion washing over her. She instinctively pulled the shirt tighter around herself. "Where am I? Why am I here?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. He placed the first aid kit on the nightstand, his deep gaze fixed on the wound on her knee, his brow slightly furrowed. "You fainted. I brought you to my penthouse," he said, his voice even and unreadable. "You were completely exhausted and dehydrated. You just need some rest. But you will be fine. That wound, however, needs to be cleaned now." With that, he knelt on one knee beside her bed. The gesture horrified Evelyn. "Mr. Sterling, you don't have to. I can do it myself." She tried to pull her leg back. How could a man of his stature possibly do this for her? "Don't move." Alexander's voice deepened, carrying an authority that permitted no refusal. He gently took hold of her ankle. His hand was warm and steady, and she froze, not daring to move. He soaked a cotton ball in antiseptic and began to carefully clean away the dried blood and debris around her wound. His movements were incredibly gentle and meticulous, as if he were handling a priceless, fragile treasure. This tender care was the absolute antithesis of Julian's brutal violence. Evelyn bit her lip, a sudden sting in her nose. How long had it been since someone had treated her with such gentleness? In 2 years as Mrs. Hayes, she had known only cold indifference and torment. Even when she was sick, Julian had never once asked after her, let alone personally tended to a wound like this. The stark contrast made her eyes well up with tears. "This might sting a little. Bear with it." Alexander looked up and saw her glistening eyes. His heart HDHD. He said nothing more, his touch becoming even lighter. After disinfecting the wound, he carefully applied an ointment and covered it with a sterile bandage. He remained focused throughout the entire process, not uttering a single unnecessary word. When he was finished, he stood up and began to pack away the first aid kit. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Evelyn whispered, "for everything tonight." "Thank you. You're welcome." He put the kit away and turned back to her. "Between us, there's no need for thanks." Evelyn stared at him, confused. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. I don't think we know each other." Alexander looked deeply into her eyes, a complex mix of nostalgia and regret swirling in their depths. He sighed softly. "We've met before. You've just forgotten." His words were like a stone dropped into the still lake of her heart, sending ripples of confusion through her. She knew him. She racked her brain. But apart from the famous name Alexander Sterling, she had no memory of the man standing before her. While Evelyn was lost in her bewildered thoughts, a storm of fury was raging elsewhere. At the Hayes mansion, the scene was one of chaos. Crash! An expensive crystal coffee table was sent flying into a wall by a single kick from Julian Hayes, shattering into 1,000 pieces. His face was darker than a thundercloud, his eyes bloodshot, and a chilling, murderous aura radiated from him. "Damn you, Alexander Sterling," he roared, grabbing a bottle of whiskey from the bar and chugging it down. His assistant, Mr. Davis, stood trembling nearby, not daring to breathe too loudly. He had never seen Mr. Hayes this incandescent with rage. The anniversary gala had been cut short, and the company's stock was sure to plummet after tonight's scandal. But what had truly sent his boss over the edge was the sight of Mrs. Hayes being carried away by Alexander Sterling in front of everyone. It was an unbearable public humiliation. "You have 30 minutes," Julian snarled, hurling the empty bottle to the floor where it exploded. "I want to know everything. What is the relationship between Alexander Sterling and Evelyn Reed? Why did he interfere in my affairs? Dig up every single detail, no matter how small. Do you understand?" "Yes. Yes, Mr. Hayes. Right away." Mr. Davis felt as if he'd been granted a pardon. He bowed quickly and scurried out, terrified that another second in the room would see him incinerated by his boss's wrath. Julian stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving. The image of Alexander holding Evelyn kept flashing in his mind, a fire searing his sanity. Evelyn Reed, the woman he had always scorned, the woman he could trample on at will, had dared to be in another man's arms. And that man was Alexander Sterling, his mortal enemy. "Evelyn Reed, you've got a lot of nerve," he seethed, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Let's see where you can run without my permission." Evelyn couldn't sleep a wink that night. She lay in the large, soft bed of the unfamiliar penthouse, tossing and turning. Alexander's words, "We've met before. You've just forgotten," echoed in her mind, planting a seed of doubt and confusion. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't recall a thing. The city outside was a blanket of darkness, and the quiet luxury of the penthouse only amplified the emptiness in her heart. She had spent the night in another man's home. By now, Julian was probably either in a blind rage or comfortably in the arms of Chloe Vance, completely unconcerned about the disappearance of his nominal wife. The thought of Julian sent a dull ache through her chest. 2 years. 2 long years she had endured this hellish marriage. She remembered her wedding night as if it were yesterday. Dressed in a pristine white nightgown, she had waited for him, nervous and hopeful, in their lavishly decorated suite. But when he finally entered, reeking of alcohol, his first words to her were not of love, but of ice. "Evelyn Reed, don't expect anything from this marriage. To me, you are nothing but a tool to exact revenge on your family." From that day on, her life was plunged into darkness. He never touched her, never offered a shred of warmth. His presence at home was erratic, and each return was marked by a cold disgust. He humiliated her in front of the staff, criticized her at every meal. He called her a parasite, called her family a pack of hypocrites who had used dirty tricks to harm his. She tried to explain, but he never listened. He only believed what he wanted to believe. Once she had been severely ill with a fever, bedridden for days. She had called him, her voice weak, hoping for a single word of concern. But he had answered coldly, "I'm busy," and hung up. The next day, she saw in the news that he had taken Chloe Vance on a vacation to Bali. His smile in the photos was radiant. That was the day her heart had died. She had often asked herself why she endured it all. Perhaps it was for the faint hope that one day he would see the truth, see her sincerity. Or perhaps it was for the promise she had made to help her family through their financial difficulties by agreeing to this marriage. But what had her patience and tolerance earned her? Public humiliation in front of hundreds, being dragged by her own husband like an animal, forced to apologize to the very mistress who had framed her. Thinking of last night, Evelyn's body trembled, the searing pain in her scalp, the cold of the floor, Chloe's triumphant gaze, Julian's furious roars, and the pitying, contemptuous looks from everyone else. It all played in a torturous slow-motion loop in her mind. A hot tear silently traced a path down her temple, soaking into the pillow. Enough. It was truly enough. Her forbearance was not infinite. Her heart, even if it were made of steel, had been worn down to nothing by his relentless cruelty. Last night was the final straw. She could not continue to live this meaningless, undignified existence. Evelyn wiped the tear from her face. She looked out the window where the distant horizon was beginning to glow with a silver light. A new day was dawning, and it was time for her life to have a new beginning as well. A bold and resolute decision formed in her mind. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtains, Evelyn was already awake. She showered and changed back into her gown from the previous night. Despite its wrinkled state, she neatly folded Alexander's dress shirt and left it on the bed. When she came downstairs, she found Alexander already at the dining table reading a financial newspaper. He had changed into comfortable loungewear, looking relaxed and elegant. A lavish breakfast was laid out on the table. Seeing her, he put down the paper. "You're up. Come have some breakfast." Evelyn walked over and sat opposite him. She didn't touch the food, merely looking at him in silence. Alexander didn't press her. He poured her a glass of warm milk and pushed it toward her. "Drink this. It will help." His thoughtful gesture once again stirred a complex emotion within her. She took a deep breath. Steeling herself, she looked him straight in the eye, her voice quiet but firm. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for everything. I've made my decision." Alexander sat down his coffee cup and watched her. "Waiting. I'm filing for divorce." The 4 words spoken so lightly felt as though a great weight that had been crushing her for 2 years had finally been lifted. A profound sense of relief washed over her. Alexander showed no surprise. His deep eyes were calm, as if he had already anticipated her decision. He simply nodded, his low voice an unspoken word of support. "Good." That single word, so concise, was the greatest encouragement she could have asked for. "If you need any help," he added, "just ask." Evelyn looked at him, her heart filled with gratitude. She didn't know why he was being so kind to her, but she knew this man was not like Julian Hayes. He respected her. "Thank you," she said, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips after a long dark night. "But this is something I have to do myself." She had to be the one to end this mistaken marriage to reclaim her own justice and dignity. The taxi pulled up to the imposing iron gates of the Hayes estate. Evelyn paid the driver and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She was back at the place she had called home for 2 years, but it felt only alien and suffocating. When she entered the living room, the atmosphere was chilling. Mrs. Gable, the longtime housekeeper, saw her, and her expression became a mixture of pity and fear. She mumbled a greeting and quickly retreated to the kitchen. Julian was sitting on the sofa as if he had been waiting for her. He had changed into casual clothes, but his face was dark and grim, his eyes bloodshot. A low-pressure system seemed to hover around him, warning everyone to stay away. An ashtray at his feet was overflowing with cigarette butts. It was clear he hadn't slept either. Seeing her, he curled his lip into a cold sneer, his voice raspy with derision. Well, if it isn't Mrs. Hayes, finally gracing us with her presence. I was beginning to think you'd decided to move into Alexander Sterling's penthouse for good." Evelyn ignored his sarcastic jabs. In the past, his words would have wounded her, and she would have tried to explain, but now her heart was numb. She answered calmly, "I came back to pack my things." "Pack your things?" Julian let out a laugh as if he'd heard the world's funniest joke. He shot up from the sofa, striding to block her path. His tall frame cast a looming shadow over her. "Evelyn Reed, who gave you permission to leave? You are my wife. Do you really think you can go anywhere without my consent?" His voice was filled with a possessive, patriarchal arrogance, as if she were a mere object that belonged to him. Evelyn looked up, meeting his furious gaze without a trace of fear. "Julian, this marriage was nothing more than a transaction, and now I want to end it." "End it?" Julian sneered, his hand shooting out to grip her chin, forcing her to look him in the eye. "What right do you have to talk about ending it? After spending the night with my enemy, you think you can just walk away? Evelyn Reed, do you take me for a fool?" The pain in her jaw was sharp, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked at him coldly, her eyes, devoid of their former weakness and tolerance, filled only with distance and disgust. "Think whatever you want. Let go of me." Her defiance enraged him further. This woman, who had always been so meek and submissive, now dared to look at him with such eyes. He tightened his grip. "Don't you forget that your family's company still depends on Hayes Global. If you dare to defy me, I will bankrupt them overnight." This was his ultimate weapon, the chain that had bound her for 2 years. But this time, It had no effect. Do as you wish, Evelyn said coldly. The debt to my family. I've paid it with 2 years of my life and my dignity. From this day forward, I don't owe anyone anything. With that, she wrenched her chin from his grasp. Julian was stunned by her action. He had never expected her to fight back. In his moment of shock, Evelyn stepped back, putting a safe distance between them. She opened her handbag and pulled out a neatly folded document. Without a word, she threw it at his chest. The white pages fluttered to the ground, landing at his feet. At the top, in bold letters, were the words divorce petition, and in the space for the wife's signature, the name Evelyn Reed was written in a firm, resolute hand. Julian looked down at the document on the floor, his pupils constricting violently. Divorce. This woman was daring to serve him with divorce papers. You dare? He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief and incandescent rage. Why wouldn't I? Evelyn looked at him, her expression as calm as a still lake. The life of a nominal Mrs. Hayes. I don't want it anymore. The wealth and status of the Hayes family. I have no desire for them either. Julian Hayes. I have had enough. She didn't want to waste another second. She turned and walked up the stairs, leaving the stunned man behind. She didn't have many possessions at the Hayes mansion. The clothes, bags, and jewelry he had bought for her, she had never touched. She packed only a few of her own casual outfits, her beloved design books, and a few personal items. Everything fit into one small suitcase. When she came back downstairs with her suitcase, Julian was still standing in the same spot. But the divorce petition was now in his hand, crumpled into a distorted ball. Seeing her about to leave, he lunged forward to block her way. I don't agree. That's not important. Evelyn's voice was like ice. I'll file with the court. Evelyn Reed. He roared, the anger and loss of control driving him mad. He couldn't understand how things had come to this. She was supposed to be the one begging him. Why was she now the one casting him aside? Do you think you can live a good life after leaving me? Do you think Alexander Sterling is serious about you? Don't be so naive. To him, you're just another pawn to use against me. Whatever I am to him is my business. As for you, Mr. Hayes, Evelyn's lips curved into a deeply mocking smile. You should be more concerned with your dear Chloe Vance. I'm sure she's in desperate need of your comfort right now. With that, she gave him no further opportunity to speak. She slipped past him, pulling her suitcase and walked straight out the door. Stop, Evelyn Reed. You stop right there. Julian's shouts echoed behind her. But she never looked back. The bright sunlight outside hit her eyes. A little dazzling, but incredibly warm. She took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling a lightness in her chest she had never known. Finally, she had escaped the gilded cage called the Hayes estate. Behind her, Julian watched her resolute back, his hand crushing the divorce papers until his veins bulged. A feeling of emptiness and an unprecedented panic surged through him. Stepping out of the Hayes estate felt like shedding 1,000-pound weight. The New York sky seemed unusually clear, the air easier to breathe. But with freedom came a sense of uncertainty about the future. Where would she go? What would she do? She had only walked a short distance when a familiar black Bentley pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing Alexander Sterling's handsome, composed face. Get in, he said simply. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She didn't want to stand here a second longer. Afraid Julian might follow, Alexander got out, opened the trunk himself to place her suitcase inside, and then held the car door open for her. His natural gentlemanly actions warmed her heart. The car pulled away, leaving the imposing but cold mansion behind. Where are you headed? Alexander asked as the car merged into the city traffic. I'm not sure yet. I was thinking of finding a hotel for now, Evelyn answered honestly. Alexander was silent for a moment. A hotel isn't a long-term solution. I have a high-end condo that's currently empty. The security is excellent, and no one will bother you. Consider it a loan. You can move out once you're settled. Oh, no, Mr. Sterling. I couldn't. That would be too much trouble. Evelyn quickly refused. She already owed him too much. I don't like being refused. Alexander glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his tone leaving no room for argument. Besides, I'm not helping you for free. Consider it a favor you owe me. I'll collect later. Hearing him put it that way made it easier for her to accept. She didn't want to be a burden to anyone. In that case, thank you. Alexander's condo was located in one of the most exclusive residential buildings in the heart of the city. It wasn't massive, just one bedroom and a living area. But it was decorated with a warm, sophisticated taste. Most importantly, it gave her a sense of safety and freedom. After helping her with her suitcase, Alexander didn't stay long. He handed her a key and a new phone. My number is in here. Call me if you need anything. Don't use your old number for now. To avoid being harassed, his thoughtfulness left her speechless, able to offer only another thank you. When Alexander left, Evelyn was finally alone in her own space. She walked around the apartment, touching the furniture. This was where she would start her new life. In the following days, Evelyn began her job search. With an honors degree in jewelry design from a prestigious university in London, she was confident she could find a good position. She quickly updated her resume and sent it to major jewelry companies across the city. As expected, she soon received several calls for interviews. She was excited and hopeful for a fresh start. But things were not as easy as she had imagined. The first company interviewed her and the HR manager seemed very impressed, even telling her to come in the following week to start. But 2 days later, they called to say the position had been filled by a more suitable candidate. The second company was even stranger. She had just arrived when the receptionist told her the interview had been cancelled for unforeseen reasons. At the third company, after she introduced herself, the interview became noticeably cold, asking only a few perfunctory questions before dismissing her. After several similar experiences, Evelyn, no matter how naive, realized something was wrong. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. And that someone could only be Julian Hayes. He wanted to corner her, to force her to come back and beg him. The thought of his pettiness made her want to laugh. Did he really think that would make her submit? He had severely underestimated her. That evening, after a long day of frustration and disappointment, Evelyn returned to the apartment. She didn't turn on the lights, simply slumping to the cold floor and gazing out at the glittering cityscape through the large window. A sense of loneliness and helplessness enveloped her. She truly didn't know what to do next. As she sat there, her eyes fell on her half-open suitcase in the corner. Tucked between some books was an old worn sketchbook. It was the one she had used throughout her university years, filled with all her passion and dedication to jewelry design. Since marrying Julian, she had packed it away, burying her dreams along with it. A powerful urge took hold of her. She stood up, walked over, and with trembling hands, picked up the sketchbook. As she turned the pages, exquisite drawings and bold ideas came to life before her eyes. The flame of passion she thought had been extinguished was suddenly rekindled, burning brighter than ever. That's right. Why did she have to beg for a job? Why couldn't she create her own path? It was a moment of epiphany. Evelyn quickly found a pencil and paper. Sitting at the coffee table under the warm lamplight, she began to draw. Her strokes were hesitant at first, but quickly became fluid and confident. Graceful curves and intricate details emerged on the blank page. She drew non-stop, forgetting the time, forgetting the day's exhaustion and failures. Her mind was filled only with sparkling gemstones, delicate necklaces, and unique earrings. She was creating her own world, a world no one could trample on or take away. By the time she finished sketching a necklace shaped like a teardrop, which she named Rebirth, Evelyn looked up at her creation, a radiant and determined smile spreading across her face. You can do this, Evelyn, she whispered to herself. The road ahead might be difficult, but she would never fall again. For days, Evelyn threw herself into her designs, channeling her frustration and disappointment into creative energy. The pieces she created were not just beautiful. They held stories. They had soul. But she knew that drawings alone were not enough to bring them to life. She needed capital, a workshop, and a source for raw materials, all things she didn't have. Just as she was struggling with where to begin, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, Evelyn was surprised to see Alexander Sterling. He was dressed in a sharp business suit carrying a briefcase, the epitome of a successful tycoon. "Mr. Sterling," she said, surprised. "What brings you here?" "I was in the neighborhood. Just thought I'd check in on you," Alexander said casually. His eyes swept over her, noting her tired but vibrant expression before landing on the sketches spread across her coffee table. "Job search not going well?" His question hit home. Evelyn nodded, a bitter smile on her face. "It's not just not going well. It's completely hopeless. Julian has made his move." She didn't try to hide it from him. She knew with his resources he was already aware of her situation. Alexander wasn't surprised. He stepped inside, placed his briefcase on a table, and picked up one of her drawings, the rebirth necklace. A look of genuine admiration crossed his face. "Your designs have soul," he remarked. "To let such a talent go to waste. Are you willing to accept that?" "What choice do I have? No company will hire me, and I don't have the capital to start my own." Alexander put the drawing down and looked directly into her eyes, his expression serious. "What if someone was willing to invest in you?" Evelyn froze, her heart skipping a beat. "Mr. Sterling, what do you mean?" "I want to invest in your talent." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a pre-drafted contract, sliding it across the table to her. "I will provide all the capital, the office space, the staff, and the connections you need to launch your own jewelry brand. Profits will be split according to the terms in this contract. All you have to do is focus on one thing: designing." His offer was like a dazzling ray of light cutting through her darkest moment. But she quickly regained her composure, a sense of caution rising within her. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Sterling? You're a businessman. You wouldn't do something without a benefit. Are you using me to get back at Julian Hayes?" She refused to be a pawn in someone else's game again. Alexander met her gaze without flinching, a faint, confident smile on his lips. "To deal with Julian Hayes, I have 100 other methods, none of which are this complicated." He paused, his expression becoming more sincere and resolute than ever. "Evelyn, my reason is very simple." His deep voice was clear and steady. "I don't believe in Julian Hayes. I believe in the talent of Evelyn Reed." His words were like a warm current flowing into her cold, battered heart. "He believes in my talent." For 2 long years, all she had heard were insults and ridicule. This was the first time someone had expressed faith in her abilities. Her eyes welled up. She looked down at the contract, the letters blurring before her. She was torn. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The only way she could stand on her own 2 feet and prove Julian wrong. But at the same time, she was afraid of being indebted to him, afraid of their relationship becoming complicated. As if reading her mind, Alexander continued, "This is a straightforward business transaction. I provide the investment. You use your talent to generate a return. We are partners. You don't need to feel indebted to me." His words dispelled her final hesitation. That's right. This was a partnership, and she was desperate to prove herself, to see her creations come to life. Evelyn looked up, her eyes no longer filled with uncertainty, but with a fierce determination. "Okay." She picked up the pen and without a second thought, signed her name on the contract. "Mr. Sterling, I hope we have a successful partnership." Seeing her signature, Alexander smiled, satisfied. "Call me Alexander," he said. "Partners don't need to be so formal." In that moment, Evelyn felt that a new chapter of her life had truly begun. A chapter called hope. After the contract was signed, things moved at lightning speed. Alexander was a man of his word. Within a week, he had secured a perfect studio space for her in a prime downtown location, registered the company, and hired the initial staff. Her personal jewelry brand, Evelyn Reed, was officially born. The next crucial step was finding a reliable workshop for handcrafted pieces. No matter how advanced technology became, High-end jewelry still required the skilled hands of master craftsmen to give it soul. "I know a renowned older goldsmith in upstate New York," Alexander told her over the phone. "His craftsmanship is unparalleled, but he's notoriously picky and doesn't work with just anyone. I'm heading up there this weekend. Would you like to come with me?" It was only a couple of hours' drive from the city. This was a golden opportunity Evelyn couldn't pass up. "Yes, I'll go with you." That weekend, Alexander drove to pick her up personally. On the way, they discussed business and the future direction of her brand. The more they talked, the more Evelyn admired his business acumen and foresight. He wasn't just an investor with deep pockets. He was a brilliant mentor. The Master Artisan's workshop was located in a quiet, charming old town rich with history. The meeting went smoothly, perhaps out of respect for Alexander, or perhaps genuinely impressed by Evelyn's unique designs. The old master agreed to the partnership. On the drive back to the city, Evelyn let out a sigh of relief. A great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the past few days, she had poured all her energy into her work, often staying up late to perfect her designs. Now that things were falling into place, the exhaustion finally caught up with her. Sitting in the comfortable car, watching the scenery blur past, her eyelids grew heavy. She drifted off to sleep. Alexander glanced at the sleeping woman beside him and instinctively slowed the car, adjusting the climate control. Bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, her face was peaceful and delicate, her long lashes fluttering slightly. He reached out, intending to brush a stray strand of hair from her cheek, but pulled his hand back, not wanting to wake her. Suddenly, Evelyn started to stir. A sheen of sweat appeared on her forehead, and her brows furrowed as if she were trapped in a nightmare. He grew concerned and reached out to touch her forehead. It was burning hot. "Evelyn, Evelyn, wake up," he said softly, gently shaking her. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and dazed. Her cheeks were flushed and her breath was hot. "So hot. I feel sick," she mumbled. In her delirium, a name escaped her lips. "Lo. Don't run." The name Leo made Alexander freeze, his hand on her shoulder tightening. Leo. That was the name of her close friend from her university days. The one he had seen her with so many times on campus all those years ago. "Evelyn, you have a high fever." He quickly regained his composure and accelerated, driving straight to his penthouse instead of her condo. He carried her inside, laid her on the bed, and immediately called his personal physician, while the doctor examined her and gave her some fever-reducing medication. Alexander never left her side, looking at her flushed, vulnerable face. He felt an indescribable ache in his heart. After the doctor left, he sat by her bed, carefully dabbing the sweat from her brow with a cool cloth. In her feverish state, she began to talk in her sleep again. "No, don't take it. That's my design. Please, somebody help me." This time, it was Alexander who was left stunned. The words, "somebody help me," were like a key, unlocking a dusty, long-forgotten memory. He remembered a fall afternoon 5 years ago. He was a final-year student, and she was a sophomore in the design department. He had been walking past the department's exhibition hall when he saw her in a heated argument with another female student. The other girl was accusing her of plagiarism and trying to snatch her design portfolio. Just as Evelyn, helpless and on the verge of tears, was about to give in, he had stepped forward. He hadn't said much, but with a few logical points, he highlighted the subtle differences in their drawings, proving her innocence. The young woman that day had looked up at him, her large, tear-filled eyes wide with gratitude, and whispered, "Thank you." He had simply nodded and walked away. But her resilient spirit and those clear eyes had been etched into his memory. From that day on, he had quietly watched her from a distance. He knew she had a best friend named Leo. He knew she loved to sit by the window in the library. He knew her favorite ice cream flavor was strawberry. He had planned to formally pursue her after she graduated. But then a sudden family crisis had forced him to move abroad to take over the family business. By the time he returned, she was already Mrs. Hayes, so she hadn't completely forgotten him. The memory of that senior was just faded, buried under years of pain and suffering. Alexander sighed softly. This time, he didn't hesitate. He gently stroked her hot cheek, his expression a complex mixture of tender sorrow, regret, and an unshakable resolve. Evelyn, he whispered, I was too late back then. This time I will never let Julian Hayes hurt you again. The news that Evelyn Reed, ex-wife of Hayes Global CEO Julian Hayes, had launched her own jewelry brand with the backing of Alexander Sterling, president of Sterling Enterprises, spread like wildfire through New York's elite circles. This was no longer a private marital dispute. It was a public declaration of war between two corporate empires. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see how Julian Hayes would retaliate. Inside the CEO's office at Hayes Global, the air was colder than a freezer. Smash! An expensive smartphone was hurled against the wall, shattering into pieces. Julian's face was terrifyingly dark. His eyes shot with furious red veins. On his polished mahogany desk lay an open copy of a business magazine. The feature photo was of Evelyn standing next to Alexander at the opening of her new office. In the picture, she wore an elegant white pantsuit, her hair falling softly to her shoulders. Her makeup was subtle, but she radiated a confidence and brilliance he had never seen in her. Her smile was no longer forced or resigned. It was genuine, a radiant sunbeam. Standing beside her, Alexander looked at her with an expression of undisguised tenderness and admiration. They looked perfect together. The image was a sharp needle stabbing directly into Julian's monumental ego. He couldn't accept that the woman he had cast aside, the woman he thought would come crawling back to him, was now standing on her own, shining so brightly next to his arch-nemesis. For him, this was worse than losing $1 billion deal. It was a slap in the face, a public proclamation that her life was better without him. Evelyn Reed, you've got guts. Siding with Alexander Sterling to oppose me, he seethed. Just then, the office door opened and Chloe Vance sashayed in carrying 2 cups of artisanal iced lattes. Julian, honey, don't be so angry. It's bad for your health, she cooed, placing his coffee on his desk. She's just a washed-up divorce. Is she really worth getting so worked up about? Julian grunted non-committally. Chloe glanced at the magazine photo, a flash of venomous jealousy in her eyes. She knew that no matter how cruelly Julian treated Evelyn, that woman still held a unique place in his mind. Now his obsession with his ex-wife was becoming more apparent, and she felt threatened. She wrapped her arms around his neck from behind, whispering seductively in his ear, I think she's just doing all this to get your attention. The angrier you get, the more successful she feels. You need to show her what a mistake it was to leave you. What are you suggesting? Julian's eyes narrowed. She wants to be a businesswoman. Fine. Let her. Chloe purred with a sly smile. But how long can a new company with no resources or experience survive with just a little pressure from you? Alexander Sterling can't be there to protect her every second of the day. And when her little company fails, who will she come crying back to? Chloe's words were like a drug, playing perfectly to Julian's arrogant and controlling nature. Yes, he couldn't let her and Alexander get what they wanted. He had to show her who held the power. You're right, Julian said with a cruel, cold smile. He pushed Chloe away and picked up his office phone. Get the head of procurement in here now. A dirty retaliatory plan began to take shape. A few days later, Evelyn's company faced its first crisis. All preparations were nearly complete. They were just waiting for the first shipment of raw gemstones to arrive to begin production. But on the scheduled delivery date, one by one, the suppliers she had contracted with called to back out, citing a variety of flimsy excuses. I'm so sorry, Miss Reed, but our shipment is stuck in customs. I'm afraid we can't make the delivery. Apologies, but we've just signed a much larger contract. All of our high-quality stones are spoken for. Miss Reed, perhaps you should find another supplier. We really can't help you. After a series of such calls, Evelyn knew this was no coincidence. She had someone investigate, and the results were exactly what she had expected. Every major gemstone supplier in the country had received a warning from Hayes Global. Anyone who did business with Evelyn Reed's company would be making an enemy of Julian Hayes. In the business world, no one was foolish enough to offend a giant like Hayes Global for the sake of a fledgling startup. Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the stalled production schedule, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. She never thought Julian would stoop so low as to use such cheap, underhanded tactics. He didn't just want to beat her in business. He wanted to crush her dreams. Without materials, all her designs were just paper. The entire product launch would be indefinitely postponed. For a new company, such a major setback could be a death blow. The pressure weighed heavily on her. As the head of the company, she was responsible for the employees who had put their faith in her and for Alexander's investment. She couldn't let herself fail. Evelyn tried everything. She reached out to smaller suppliers, even private dealers, but was met with the same refusals. Julian's influence had choked off every possible domestic channel. She stayed in her office late into the night, her mind stretched to its breaking point. Stuck. That was the only word to describe her situation. Was she really going to have to surrender to Julian's pressure? Just as she was on the verge of despair, her phone rang. It was Alexander, still at the office. His familiar deep voice came through the line. "Yes, just finishing up a few things," Evelyn said, trying to sound as normal as possible. She didn't want him to worry. But Alexander was too perceptive. "I'm downstairs. Come on down. I'm taking you to dinner. You don't have to. I'm not hungry. Come down." His voice was firm, leaving no room for refusal. "If you don't, I'm coming up." Knowing it was futile to argue, Evelyn shut down her computer and went downstairs. His car was waiting. He didn't take her to a fancy restaurant, but to a small, cozy area specializing in regional cuisine she enjoyed. He ordered a few light dishes that he knew were to her taste. During the meal, he didn't ask about her work troubles. He simply placed food on her plate and shared a few amusing anecdotes, trying to lighten the mood. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. It wasn't until the end of the meal that he set down his chopsticks and looked at her. "You don't need to worry about the raw material supply anymore." Evelyn looked up, stunned. You knew? Julian only knows a few childish tricks," Alexander said with a dismissive smirk. "He thinks blocking the domestic market is enough to stop you. His vision is too narrow." He took out a tablet, opened a file, and pushed it toward her. "Take a look." Evelyn took the tablet. On the screen was detailed information on top-tier gemstone suppliers from Belgium, South Africa, and Myanmar. Alongside the information were pre-drafted contracts just waiting for her signature. The quality and variety of these stones far surpassed anything the domestic suppliers could offer. Evelyn was speechless. "I used some old connections to contact them. They've agreed to give us an exclusive supply contract at a preferential rate," Alexander said nonchalantly, as if it were a trivial matter. "Julian wants to play games. Fine. We'll just open up an international supply chain. Let's see how far his reach can extend." His action was more than just solving a problem. He had turned a crisis into an opportunity, transforming Julian's oppressive tactics into a stepping stone to elevate her brand to a global standard. Evelyn looked at the man across from her, a powerful wave of emotion washing over her. Not just gratitude, but admiration and something more. A flutter in her heart. He hadn't just solved her problem. He had shown her a wider path, taught her how to turn a bad situation to her advantage. He was giving her the weapons to fight her own battles. "Alexander," she said, the name slipping out naturally. I really don't know how to thank you." "I told you we're partners," he said, his gaze deepening. His usually calm eyes now held a possessive, burning intensity. "And I don't allow anyone to bully my partner." He leaned forward slightly, reaching across the table to gently wipe a tiny smudge of sauce from the corner of her lip. The gesture was intimate and natural. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a low, impossibly resolute murmur. "And I also told you before." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. He looked directly into her eyes, his every word etching itself into her mind. "Anyone who wants to touch you will have to go through me first." It was no longer just a bold declaration at a party. It was a promise. The most solid and reassuring vow of protection she had ever received. The main hall of the New York International Convention Center was packed with reporters from the city's most prestigious newspapers and magazines. Camera flashes strobed relentlessly, all aimed at the exquisitely designed stage where the Evelyn Reed brand logo was projected in elegant script. This was the press conference for the debut of her first collection, Rebirth. Backstage, Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She wore a cream-colored silk dress of her own design. Simple, elegant, and perfectly showcasing her slender figure and gentle aura. Compared to the resigned, weary woman of the past, she now looked radiant and full of life. "Don't be nervous," a deep voice said beside her. Alexander had appeared at her side. He wasn't in a suit, but a simple dress shirt, looking more relaxed than usual. "You've prepared for this. Just be yourself." He hadn't taken a seat in the front row, choosing instead to stand in a discreet corner backstage. He said that today was her stage and he didn't want his presence to overshadow the main star. His consideration warmed her. She nodded, smiling at him. "Thank you." It was time. Evelyn walked onto the stage to a round of applause and a sea of flashing lights. She stood at the podium looking out at the hundreds of faces below. Her heart filled not with fear but with pride and fierce determination. "Good afternoon everyone," she began, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Evelyn Reed. Today I am incredibly honored to introduce you to my debut collection, Rebirth." She began to explain the concept behind the collection, speaking of raw gemstones that, through a painful process of cutting and polishing, become dazzlingly brilliant. She spoke of metamorphosis, of finding oneself again after falling. Her words were sincere, touching the hearts of her audience. Everyone could feel the story and soul she had poured into her work. As the models began to showcase the designs, a collective gasp went through the room. Evelyn's jewelry was truly unique, a perfect blend of classic elegance and modern innovation. The press conference was a resounding success until suddenly the grand doors of the hall were thrown open. Julian Hayes and Chloe Vance strode in their unexpected arrival, causing an immediate uproar. Every camera lens swiveled to face them. Julian wore his usual arrogant expression, but his face was grim. Chloe clung to his arm, her face a mask of perfectly applied makeup, but her eyes were filled with tears, a picture of tragic beauty. "I apologize for the interruption." Julian's cold voice cut through the music. "But I am here today to seek justice for Chloe." On stage, Evelyn's heart tightened. She knew they were here to cause trouble. Chloe detached herself from Julian and stepped forward, her voice a pathetic, broken sob. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I know today is a happy day for my former sister-in-law. I shouldn't be here, but I cannot stay silent any longer." She held up a tablet, projecting a design sketch onto the large screen. Everyone could see it bore a striking resemblance to the Rebirth necklace Evelyn had just presented. "This design," Chloe choked out, "is a piece I have poured my heart and soul into for an upcoming design competition. I once showed it to Evelyn, trusting her as a dear friend and seeking her advice. I never imagined she would steal my idea, pass it off as her own, and launch it publicly like this." Her accusation was a bombshell. The hall exploded with murmurs. Plagiarism. It was a fatal accusation for a designer. Reporters immediately swarmed toward Evelyn. Microphones extended. "Miss Reed, is what Miss Vance says true? Can you explain the similarities between the two designs? Did you take a shortcut to success?" Evelyn stood on the stage, facing a barrage of accusatory questions and suspicious stares. She looked at Julian and saw the cold satisfaction in his eyes. He wanted to destroy her, to destroy everything she was trying to build. But she was not the Evelyn of the past. She would not cry or panic. She took a deep breath and raised the microphone, her voice surprisingly calm. "Thank you, Miss Vance, for raising this concern," she said, looking directly at Chloe. "But before we conclude who copied whom, I would like to ask you a question. You said this was a design you poured your heart and soul into. Does that mean you have been working on it for a long time?" Chloe, though slightly flustered, nodded firmly. "Yes. I've been thinking about it for the last 6 months. 6 months. Evelyn's lips curved into a slight smile. That's a shame. She turned to the technician. Could you please connect my laptop to the projector? A moment later, the screen switched to her laptop's display. Evelyn calmly opened a password-protected folder filled with scanned images. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice rang out. Clear and confident. These are pages from my sketchbook from when I was a sophomore in college in London. She clicked through the images. On the screen appeared the very first primitive hand-drawn sketches of the rebirth necklace. The initial concepts. The development process. The revisions. Everything was documented in detail. And most importantly, in the corner of each page, a date was clearly visible. As you can see, Evelyn said, pointing to a date. This idea was conceived 5 years ago. She clicked to the final image, a photograph of her standing on a stage, accepting an award at a university competition. Around her neck was an early silver prototype of the rebirth necklace. And this, she said, her voice ringing with triumph, is the design award I won for this very piece. Also 5 years ago. The evidence was undeniable. The hall fell silent, then erupted in shocked whispers. All eyes now turned to Chloe, no longer with sympathy, but with contempt and ridicule. Chloe's face turned deathly pale. She swayed on her feet, speechless. Julian, standing beside her, was equally stunned. He had never imagined Evelyn could produce such irrefutable proof. Evelyn looked directly at them, her voice no longer gentle, but as cold as steel. Mr. Hayes, Miss Vance, is there anything else you'd like to say? Her question was a resounding slap in the face to the two troublemakers. Julian and Chloe stood frozen, utterly humiliated, with nowhere to hide. Immediately after Evelyn presented her irrefutable proof, Julian dragged a humiliated Chloe Vance out of the press conference. They became the biggest joke of the night. Backstage, after the lights had dimmed, the adrenaline wore off and exhaustion hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She collapsed into a chair, her legs feeling like jelly. The confrontation had drained her completely. Alexander approached, handing her a bottle of water. He didn't say anything, just sat quietly beside her, his eyes filled with pride and tenderness. You did great, he said after a moment, his deep voice a soothing balm. Evelyn looked up and smiled at him. I don't think I could have faced them without you here. No. Alexander shook his head. That courage was always inside you. I just helped you find it again. He was right. The woman she was today was no longer someone who would only weep and endure. She had learned how to fight for herself. The next day, the drama at the Evelyn Reed launch was front-page news. Designer Evelyn Reed shuts down plagiarism accusations in spectacular fashion rebirth collection stuns fashion world with powerful story of resilience. Julian Hayes and mistress humiliated in failed smear campaign. Evelyn Reed's name was suddenly more famous than ever. But this time she was known not as Julian Hayes' ex-wife, but as Evelyn Reed, a talented and resilient designer. The scandal Julian and Chloe had manufactured had backfired spectacularly, becoming a massive free publicity campaign that made her brand a household name overnight. The company's phone rang off the hook. Orders poured in from high-end boutiques, private clients, and even celebrities. Industry experts lauded her designs, calling them a fresh, sophisticated, and profound new voice in the world of jewelry. Evelyn was thrown into a whirlwind of work. She shuttled between her office and the workshop, personally overseeing every stage of production to ensure perfection. She led meetings, negotiated with partners, and gave press interviews. The work was demanding, but deeply fulfilling. With each passing day, she felt herself changing, becoming more confident, more decisive. The smiles on her face were more frequent and genuine. The sadness in her eyes was replaced by the sparkling light of passion and hope. The aura of success and independence was a brilliant cloak that made her shine. Meanwhile, at Julian Hayes' office, the atmosphere was the complete opposite. He sat in his vast, cold office, surrounded by newspapers and magazines, all featuring Evelyn. He stared at her picture on a magazine cover. She was smiling, a radiant, confident smile that was dazzlingly beautiful. Was that Evelyn Reed? The woman he had always considered bland, boring, and completely dependent. Why had he never seen this side of her? He vaguely recalled a time long ago when they were first engaged. He had seen her engrossed in her sketchbook at a cafe. She had looked just as vibrant and passionate then as she did in these photos. But he had dismissed it as a frivolous hobby of a rich girl. For 2 years, he had used his coldness and cruelty to grind her down, to turn a brilliant diamond into a dull stone. He thought she would remain forever in his shadow, dependent on his whims. But he was wrong. The more he tried to crush her, the stronger she became. After leaving him, she hadn't just survived. She had thrived, shining more brilliantly than ever before. Looking at her smile, a strange feeling stirred in Julian's chest. It wasn't just anger at being outsmarted. It was something akin to regret. A hollow, uncomfortable feeling, as if something precious he once held in his hand had now slipped through his fingers forever. He crumpled the newspaper, the veins on his forehead bulging. He would not accept this. He would not. Evelyn Reed could only belong to him, even if it was just to be tormented and trampled. She could only be his. While Evelyn was busy with her burgeoning career and Julian was drowning in anger and belated regret, Alexander Sterling was quietly working on something else. He wasn't content with just helping Evelyn get back on her feet. He wanted to eradicate the root of the pain that had tormented her for years. The murky feud between the Hayes and Reed families. The very excuse Julian had used to torture her. In a quiet tea house on the outskirts of the city, Alexander sat across from a middle-aged man with a weathered face but incredibly sharp eyes. This was Mr. Peterson, the best private investigator in New York. A man he had gone to great lengths to hire. Mr. Sterling, this is everything I could find on the Hayes and Reed incident from 10 years ago, Peterson said, pushing a thick file across the table. Alexander took the file and began to read. According to the story Julian had always believed, 10 years ago, Hayes Global and the Reed Corporation were bidding for a massive government real estate project. At the last minute, the Reeds had allegedly used dirty tactics, leaking confidential information from Hayes Global's bid to another competitor, causing them to lose catastrophically. Simultaneously, the Hayes International Gemstone supply chain was mysteriously disrupted, triggering a severe financial crisis. Julian's father, overwhelmed by the shock and stress, fell ill and died shortly after. All circumstantial evidence at the time pointed to the Reed family. This was the source of Julian's deep-seated hatred. Alexander read through the publicly known facts, his brow furrowed. It all seemed too neat, too clean, as if it had been orchestrated. Did you find anything new? He asked without looking up. Yes. Peterson adjusted his glasses. Thanks to the resources you provided, we located a key figure who vanished 10 years ago. A Mr. Evans, the former head of planning at Hayes Global, the man responsible for that bid. After the incident, he and his family immigrated to Canada. We found him in Vancouver. He was uncooperative at first, but after we presented him with evidence that his son had a massive gambling debt, he agreed to tell the truth. Peterson placed a small digital recorder on the table. This is his confession. Alexander pressed play. A weary, raspy male voice filled the silence. It wasn't the Reeds' fault. The Hayes and the Reeds. They were both victims. The voice trembled. The one behind it all was the Blackwood Corporation. The name made Alexander's eyes narrow. At the time, Blackwood was also a major player in real estate, a direct competitor to both Hayes and Reed. The voice on the recording continued. It turned out Blackwood had blackmailed Evans, forcing him to fabricate evidence to frame the Reeds. It was Blackwood who had leaked the bid information and sabotaged the supply chain. Their goal was to kill two birds with one stone, eliminate a strong competitor in Hayes Global, and sow discord between the Hayes and Reed families, letting them tear each other apart, while Blackwood reaped the benefits. The plan had worked perfectly. Hayes Global was crippled. The Reeds were unjustly disgraced and Blackwood swooped in to seize the market share. A few years later, The Blackwood family moved most of their assets overseas and withdrew from the New York market, erasing their tracks. The truth was laid bare. Stark and brutal. Alexander turned off the recorder. He sat motionless, but a storm was raging in his deep eyes. So that was it. Julian's entire crusade of hatred, all the pain and humiliation Evelyn had endured for 2 years, was built on a lie. A dirty conspiracy. Julian wasn't just a fool who believed a lie. He was a pathetic puppet, manipulated by others who had then unleashed his rage on an innocent woman. His cruelty stemmed not just from hatred, but from sheer stupidity. Alexander's fists clenched, a wave of fury and sorrow for Evelyn washing over him. She had suffered so much injustice. He took the file and the recorder and stood up. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Your payment will be wired tomorrow." Leaving the tea house, Alexander sat in his car for a long time. He held in his hands the proof that could clear the Reed family's name and completely destroy Julian Hayes. He had to tell Evelyn the truth. But how? This truth was so cruel. It would prove that her 2-year marriage was a farce, that her sacrifice had been utterly meaningless. He sighed. No matter how painful, she had a right to know, and he would be by her side to face it with her. Alexander didn't rush to tell Evelyn. He knew her career was just taking off, and her spirits were finally high. He didn't want to plunge her back into darkness with such a brutal revelation. He needed the right time, the right place. A few days later, on a beautiful weekend afternoon, he called her. "Are you free this weekend? I'd like to take you somewhere." "Where are we going?" Evelyn asked, still sketching a new design. "It's a secret," he said with a light chuckle. "Consider it a celebration for the successful launch of your brand." Evelyn agreed. The place he took her was their old university campus. 5 years had passed, but little had changed. The majestic oak trees still lined the stone pathways, their golden leaves rustling in the autumn breeze. The peaceful academic air of the campus was soothing. "Why did you bring me here?" Evelyn asked, surprised. "I just wanted to revisit some old memories with you," Alexander said, naturally taking her hand in his. His hand was warm and strong, his long fingers enveloping hers, sending a pleasant warmth through her. Evelyn felt a blush creep up her cheeks and tried to pull her hand away, but he held it tighter. A strange sweet feeling bloomed in her heart. They walked past the library. Alexander stopped and pointed to a second-floor window. "Do you remember? You used to love sitting right there." Evelyn looked up, amazed. How did you know?" That was indeed her favorite spot where the afternoon sun was warmest. Alexander just smiled and led her on. They arrived at the design department's exhibition hall, a place that held a painful memory for her. "You don't seem to like this place," he said as if reading her mind. "No," Evelyn admitted. "I was once accused of plagiarism here." "I know," Alexander said, his deep gaze on her. "I was here that day." Evelyn froze, whipping her head around to stare at him. "What did you say?" "I was the older student who helped you," he said, his voice low and steady. "You just didn't recognize me." The vague memory of a tall figure, of a calm, logical voice clearing her name flooded back. Her eyes widened in disbelief. That was really you." "It was me." He nodded, gently, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I started noticing you after that." The talented, resilient sophomore, Evelyn Reed, with eyes that always sparkled. Evelyn's heart began to race. So that's what he meant by, "We've met before." So they had this connection all along. He led her to a quiet stone bench by a lily pond. They sat in the gentle autumn breeze. "I watched you from afar," he said, his gaze distant. "I knew your favorite ice cream flavor. Knew you had a habit of biting your lip when you were thinking. I was going to wait until you graduated to formally introduce myself," he sighed, a hint of regret in his voice. "But then my family had a crisis and I had to leave the country suddenly. By the time I came back, you were Julian Hayes' wife." Evelyn listened in silence, her heart a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, gratitude, and a poignant ache. What if he hadn't left? What if they had met sooner? Would her life have been different? Alexander turned to her, taking both her hands in his dark eyes, intense and sincere, bored into hers. "Evelyn," he said, his voice growing husky, "I know this might be sudden. I know you've been through so much and you might not be ready for a new relationship. But I can't wait any longer." He squeezed her hands gently. "Evelyn Reed, I lost my chance with you once. I'm not letting you go again." His sudden, heartfelt confession sent a jolt through her. She was stunned, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked into his eyes and saw her own reflection, saw the seriousness, the respect, and the deep hidden love he had carried for years. This was the first time a man had ever professed his love for her this way. Not for her status, not for a purpose, but simply for who she was. Tears welled up in her eyes, tears of being deeply moved. She was at a loss for words. "Alexander," she whispered, her whole body trembling. She felt a surge of happiness, but also fear. Did she deserve a love this pure? Could she open her heart again? After Alexander's confession, Evelyn, though not officially saying yes, didn't say no either. She allowed him to enter her life more fully, having dinner with him, discussing work with him. An unnamed but sweet and warm relationship began to blossom between them. Evelyn felt a peace and hope she had never known. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, she returned to her office after a meeting to find her assistant looking troubled. "Miss Reed, Mr. Hayes is here. He says he needs to see you." The name Julian Hayes instantly froze the smile on Evelyn's face. He had left her alone for weeks. She thought he had finally given up. "Tell him I'm busy," she said coldly. "I did. But he won't leave." Before the assistant could finish, the office door was thrown open. Julian walked in. He was still in an expensive suit, but he looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes. He had lost weight and his usual arrogance was replaced by a weary, complex expression. "Evelyn, we need to talk," he said. His voice, "There's nothing left for us to talk about," Evelyn said, turning away. Julian stepped forward, standing before her desk. His eyes filled with a torment and a pleading she had never seen before were fixed on her. "Evelyn, I know I was wrong. Can you give me a chance to make it up to you?" For the first time in his life, Julian Hayes was humbling himself. He was truly sorry. Seeing her success, seeing her smile beside Alexander Sterling, he finally realized what he had lost. "Make it up to me?" Evelyn scoffed, her smile full of irony. "And how do you plan to do that, Mr. Hayes? With money? Or will you use more insults to make up for the scars you gave me?" "No," Julian said quickly. I'll treat you well. I'll give you anything you want. Can we get back together? I promise I'll never let you suffer again." He reached for her hand, but Evelyn snatched it away as if burned. "Julian, don't you find this ridiculous? When I was your wife, you treated me like dirt. Now that we're nothing to each other, you say these things. Do you really think I'd believe you? Evelyn? I mean it. Mr. Hayes, I wasn't aware you had an appointment." A calm, cold voice cut Julian off. Alexander Sterling was standing in the doorway. He walked in, his expression unruffled, but his eyes on Julian were like shards of ice. He came to stand beside Evelyn, placing a familiar, possessive hand on her shoulder. Seeing Alexander, the fire in Julian's eyes reignited. "This is between her and me. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me now," Alexander retorted coolly. "Her business is my business." He looked at Evelyn, saw the strain on her face, and said gently, "You look tired. Go rest in the back. I'll handle this." Evelyn nodded, grateful to escape. With Evelyn gone, only the two men remained, the tension in the room thick enough to snap. "Julian Hayes." Alexander's voice was devoid of warmth, his eyes sharp. "On what grounds do you demand a reconciliation?" "On the grounds of the 2 years of humiliation you subjected her to. I hated her family. I had my reasons," Julian roared, clinging to his only justification. "Reasons?" Alexander let out a contemptuous laugh. "Are you sure your reasons weren't just your own monumental stupidity?" Before Julian could react, Alexander took a tablet from his briefcase, played the audio file, and placed it on the desk. The hoarse, trembling voice of the former department head, Mr. Evans, filled the room, recounting the entire conspiracy by the Blackwood Corporation, explaining how they had all been manipulated, how the Reed family had been framed. Every word was a hammer blow to Julian's head. His expression shifted from anger to shock, then from shock to a deathly, bloodless white. He stumbled backward, bumping into the desk, nearly collapsing. "No, that's impossible. It's fake. You fabricated it," he stammered, refusing to believe the horrifying truth. Alexander coldly tossed a file onto the desk. "Here are the bank statements showing the payments from Blackwood to Evans's family in Canada, along with proof of how Blackwood manipulated the market that year. If you still don't believe it, I can arrange for you to speak with Mr. Evans directly." Julian's hands trembled as he picked up the file. The numbers, the signatures on the black and white pages seemed to dance before his eyes, mocking his foolishness. He was wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. The hatred he had nursed for a decade, the driving force behind all his cruelty, was nothing but a lie. He had hated the wrong people. He had unleashed all his fury and malice on an innocent woman who had been his wife. Thinking of everything he had done to Evelyn, the insults, the coldness, that horrific night at the gala, Julian felt a crushing weight on his chest, making it impossible to breathe. A profound, soul-crushing wave of regret and pain washed over him. He looked up at the closed door of the break room, his eyes no longer filled with anger, but with an abject despair and self-loathing. What had he done? He had personally destroyed the only woman for whom, perhaps unconsciously, he had ever felt a flicker of something real. This slap of truth was more painful than any physical blow. It had completely shattered his world. The truth acted like a razor, shredding every last bit of Julian's pride and reason. He left Evelyn's office in a daze, his entire worldview in ruins. For 2 days, he locked himself in his office, not eating or drinking, just smoking one cigarette after another. Regret and self-loathing tormented him to the brink of insanity. Images of Evelyn flooded his mind. Evelyn in an apron cooking in the kitchen, even though he never ate her food. Evelyn waiting up for him every night, even though he always came home drunk with another woman. Evelyn on the floor of the gala, her clear eyes filled with despair. Each image was a needle in his heart. After 2 days of torment, his initial shock morphed into a desperate, frantic resolve. He had to make it up to her. He had to earn her forgiveness. He had to get her back at any cost. He began his campaign in the only way a pompous, arrogant tycoon knew how, with over-the-top, ostentatious displays of wealth. On Monday morning, Evelyn arrived at her office building to a breathtaking and infuriating sight. The entire lobby from the entrance to the elevators was filled with arrangements of rare blue roses imported from Ecuador. A massive banner hung overhead with the clumsy message, "Evelyn, please forgive me." The entire building was abuzz. Evelyn felt a headache coming on. Did he think this was romantic? To her, it was just a vulgar, disruptive spectacle. Have all of this removed, she told building security. From now on, nothing from Mr. Hayes is to be allowed inside. But it didn't stop there. Throughout the day, a parade of expensive gifts arrived at her office. Limited edition jewelry from world-famous brands, designer handbags with year-long waiting lists, haute couture gowns. To most women, these would be dream gifts. To Evelyn, they were an insult. Did he think she was like his other women, that she could be bought? Send it all back, she commanded, not even glancing at the items. If they won't take it back, donate it all to charity. When material gifts failed, Julian switched tactics. He started appearing wherever she was. At lunchtime, he would be sitting at a nearby table in the cafeteria, his eyes fixed on her. In the afternoon, when she went to meet a client, his car would be silently tailing hers. In the evening, when she left work, he would be waiting in the lobby with a giant bouquet of roses. "Evelyn," he said, blocking her path, "can we just talk for a minute?" Evelyn treated him like he was invisible and tried to walk around him. Evelyn, I know you're angry, he pleaded, following her. Hit me. Yell at me. Do whatever you want. Just please don't ignore me like this. His persistence was infuriating. She stopped and turned, her eyes like ice. Mr. Hayes, don't you realize you're harassing me? Your regret is too little, too late, and frankly pathetic. Please have some dignity. With that, she turned and walked away. Alexander Sterling's car was already waiting at the curb. Alexander, who had witnessed the entire exchange from his car, didn't intervene, respecting her decision to handle it. But the moment she was inside, he drove off, his eyes flashing a cold warning at Julian in the rear-view mirror. Julian stood frozen on the sidewalk, the bouquet of roses feeling heavy in his hands. Her cold, decisive rejection filled him with a panic he had never known. He was used to being in control, but he was now realizing that some things once lost could never be bought back. Julian's grand gestures not only failed to move Evelyn, but they actively disgusted her. Realizing this, he shifted to a more pathetic and persistent strategy. He stopped sending gifts and instead became her shadow. Every morning when Evelyn left her condo, she would see his car parked across the street. He wouldn't approach, just sit and watch until she was out of sight. Every evening when she returned, the car would still be there. One rainy night, she saw him standing outside his car, completely soaked, his stubborn gaze fixed on her apartment window. His actions didn't touch her. They suffocated her. She felt like she was being stalked. He even tried to get to her through others. He went to her parents, but after learning the whole truth, they were so enraged, they threw him out. He tried to bribe employees at her company for her schedule, but no one dared to betray their boss. Helplessness and desperation made him increasingly erratic. The breaking point came one evening at an important industry dinner. In the middle of the elegant event, Julian burst in. He was disheveled, reeking of alcohol, his eyes bloodshot. He pushed through the crowd and stopped in front of Evelyn, his expression desperate. Evelyn, he rasped. The room fell silent. Alexander, who was sitting beside her, immediately stood up, shielding her. Mr. Hayes, you're drunk. I suggest you leave. Get out of my way. Julian slurred, trying to push him aside, but he was too weak. All he could do was stare helplessly at Evelyn over Alexander's broad shoulder. Evelyn, I just want to say I'm sorry. In a move that shocked everyone, Julian's voice broke, his shoulders completely slumping in defeat. A collective gasp went through the room. The CEO of Hayes Global, the proudest man in New York, was visibly falling apart, begging in front of his ex-wife. Evelyn was frozen, her anger reaching its peak. What did he think he was doing? Using pity to force her forgiveness? Making her look like a heartless shrew in front of everyone? Evelyn, say something. He begged. Yell at me. Hit me. Just don't be silent. Her patience finally snapped. She stepped around Alexander and stood before Julian, but made no move to help him up. She leaned down, her voice a cold, sharp whisper. What do you want me to say, Julian? That I forgive you? She let out a bitter laugh. Do you have any idea what my life was like for 2 years? Do you know that every insult, every cold glance from you was like a knife in my heart? Do you remember that night at the gala when you dragged me by my hair? Do you know how I felt? Where were you then? And now you kneel here and say you're sorry. She took a deep shuddering breath. Can your apology erase those scars? Can it turn back time? It can't. Julian. It never can. Every word was a hammer blow to Julian's shattered heart. He looked up into her eyes, filled with pain and righteous anger, and could not say a word. He knew the wound he had inflicted was too deep to ever be healed. The public kneeling incident was the final fatal blow to what little was left of Julian's pride. He completely fell apart. He stopped trying. Desperate and lost, he turned to alcohol, hauling himself up in bars or his cold mansion, drinking day and night. One stormy night, Julian was driving drunk. He didn't go home, didn't go to a bar. Subconsciously, he drove to Evelyn's neighborhood. He parked across the street, staring up at the lighted window of her apartment. his heart twisting in agony. He lost track of time as he decided to leave. A wave of dizziness washed over him. His foot slipped, hitting the accelerator instead of the brake. The sports car shot forward uncontrolled and slammed into a large oak tree. Crunch! The sound tore through the quiet night. Evelyn, about to go to bed, heard the crash. At the same moment, her phone rang. It was Alexander. "Evelyn, don't go outside." His voice was urgent. "Julian just got into an accident downstairs. I'm on my way." Her heart clenched. An accident. As much as she hated him, she never wished him harm. She ran to her balcony and looked down. She could see his familiar car. The front end crumpled against a tree. A moment later, an ambulance and Alexander's car arrived at the same time. She watched as Alexander efficiently took charge, helping the paramedics get an unconscious, bleeding Julian out of the car. After the ambulance left, Alexander called her back. "He's okay. Minor concussion and he's drunk. Get some rest." Evelyn stood by the window for a long time. Was this another one of his games? Self-destruction to win her pity? She felt so tired. This toxic connection needed to end once and for all. The next day, she learned Julian had been discharged and was recovering at home. She decided to see him one last time. When she arrived at the Hayes mansion, the once grand home felt desolate. Mrs. Gable led her upstairs in silence. Julian was in bed, his head bandaged, his face pale. Seeing her, a flicker of hope ignited in his dull eyes. "Evelyn, you came to see me." She stood at the foot of his bed, maintaining a safe distance. "I'm not here to see you. I'm here to make things clear. For the last time." The hope in his eyes died. "Julian, your pathetic games are over. You don't make me feel pity. You make me feel disgusted." She took a breath. Her words like daggers. "The pain you're feeling now is nothing compared to what I went through for 2 years. Do you think you have the right to suffer? Who is going to give me back my reputation and my youth?" Julian was speechless. "Your regret can't fix anything, Julian," she continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "It only forces me to relive the painful memories I'm trying so hard to forget. There is nothing left between us but hatred." She looked him straight in the eye, delivering the final, most brutal blow. "So please, if you truly feel any remorse, do one last thing for me. Let me go. Disappear from my life forever." She turned and walked out without a second glance. Julian sat in bed, watching her go, wanting to call out, to beg, but his throat was tight. He knew she was right. He had lost her forever. A single hot tear of belated regret slid down his pale cheek. When Evelyn walked out of the Hayes mansion, she felt utterly drained. Alexander's car was waiting. He got out, walked toward her, and simply opened his arms. Evelyn couldn't hold back anymore. She rushed into his embrace, burying her face in his warm chest, her body shaking. The 2-year nightmare was finally truly over. Alexander held her, stroking her hair. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He just held her, his silent presence telling her that from now on she would never have to face anything alone again. After the failed plagiarism stunt, Chloe Vance's career nosedived. Endorsements were cancelled. Roles were recast. She went from a rising star to a pariah. But what enraged her most was Julian's complete indifference. He had cast her aside like a broken toy, his entire focus now on his obsessive, regret-fueled pursuit of Evelyn. Bitterness, jealousy, and desperation twisted Chloe into a wounded animal, ready to lash out. If she couldn't have anything, then Evelyn wouldn't have peace either. She couldn't harm Evelyn physically. Alexander's protection was too tight. But she could destroy her reputation. A few weeks later, at the annual Entrepreneurs Association charity auction, Evelyn's brand was invited to participate. Her contribution was a stunning diamond and ruby necklace called the Phoenix Fire. Her most prized creation. This was Chloe's chance. At the auction, Evelyn sat in the front row with Alexander, looking confident and beautiful. When the Phoenix Fire was presented as the final item, the room gasped at its beauty just as the auctioneer began. A disheveled, frantic-looking man rushed the stage, holding a water bottle filled with a clear liquid. "Evelyn Reed. You, ___," he screamed. "You stole my design. I'll destroy you." He lunged toward the necklace, ready to throw the liquid. The crowd screamed. But before he could take a step, two of Alexander's bodyguards materialized, tackling him to the ground. The bottle flew from his hand, its contents spilling onto the marble floor, hissing and smoking as the acrid smell of acid filled the air. The room erupted in chaos. Alexander pulled Evelyn into a protective embrace, his eyes cold as he watched the man being subdued. He had anticipated that Chloe wouldn't stay quiet. He'd had her watched, and he knew she was planning something, though he hadn't expected something this depraved. The police arrived swiftly, faced with irrefutable evidence provided by Alexander's assistant, including recordings and video of Chloe paying the man. The attacker quickly confessed. Chloe, who had been hiding in the crowd, turned white and tried to flee, but it was too late. "Chloe Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault and defamation." "No, it wasn't me. Julian, save me. Julian," she shrieked as she was handcuffed and dragged away. A pathetic, ruined figure. Her career, her future, everything was over. After Evelyn's final rejection and his self-inflicted car crash, Julian Hayes completely collapsed. He abandoned his company, hiding from the world in a haze of alcohol. A corporation of that size cannot function without a leader. His absence, coupled with the recent scandals, sent Hayes Global into a tailspin. Stock prices plummeted. The empire was crumbling from within. Alexander knew it was time for the final move. He did it all out in the open. Sterling Enterprises held a major press conference to announce a new international smart city project. During the Q&A, a reporter planted by Alexander asked a seemingly unrelated question about unethical competition in the real estate market. "An excellent question," Alexander said seriously. "At Sterling Enterprises, we believe a fair and clean business environment is paramount. We condemn any and all unfair competitive practices." He paused. "And to demonstrate our commitment to this principle, I feel compelled to release some information we have recently uncovered." He signaled his assistant. The large screen behind him lit up with documents, emails, recordings, and bank statements. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. It detailed every dirty trick Julian had used to try and sabotage Evelyn's fledgling company, bribing officials, manipulating suppliers, spreading false rumors. "We are not doing this to target any single individual or company," Alexander concluded, his voice ringing with authority. "We are doing this for the sake of a more transparent business environment for everyone." His words were righteous, but they were a death blow to Hayes Global. The news exploded. Government agencies immediately launched a full-scale investigation. Partners cancelled contracts. Banks froze credit lines. The company's stock value evaporated overnight. The board tried to oust Julian, but it was too late. The ship was already sinking. The empire Julian had inherited was destroyed by his own foolish obsession. Evelyn heard the news and sat in her office, feeling not joy or triumph, but a strange hollow sense of relief. It was finally over. She called Alexander. She didn't ask why he did it. She already knew. "Alexander," she said softly, "I'm here." His warm voice answered, "Thank you." 3 simple words. But he understood. "You don't have to thank me." It was time for him to pay for what he did. Hayes Global officially declared bankruptcy. The Grand Mansion was seized by the bank. Julian Hayes, once a titan of industry, lost everything. He became a penniless ghost, living in a cheap rental apartment, his only companions the bottle and his regrets. But there was one last thing he had to do. One evening, as Evelyn and Alexander were leaving her office, she saw him standing across the street. He was thin and gaunt, his clothes rumpled, his eyes empty. He no longer looked like a tyrant, just a broken man. Alexander instinctively moved to shield her. But Evelyn stopped him. "Let me," she said. She knew this had to be the end. She walked across the street toward him. He looked at her, his dry lips moving, but no words coming out. The woman before him was still beautiful. but she radiated a strength he had never known. Her eyes held no love, no fear, not even hatred, just the cold distance one reserves for a stranger. "I've lost everything," he rasped. "I deserved it." He looked deep into her eyes, his voice filled with a final desperate plea. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I need to know one thing." He hesitated, gathering all his remaining strength. "In those 2 years, was there ever a time, even for a single moment, that you loved me?" It was his last question, the last straw he was clinging to. He hoped for just a sliver of validation, that his existence had meant something to her. Evelyn looked at him, feeling not pity, but a profound sadness for the 2 years of her life she had wasted. There had been hope, there had been effort, but it was never love. It was the duty of a wife, the forbearance of a debtor. She met his gaze and gave him the honest and most brutal answer: never. The single word crushed the last ember of hope in his soul. He stared at her, then let out a broken hoarse laugh that was more sorrowful than any cry. "I see." He said nothing more. He turned and stumbled away, his back stooped, disappearing into the evening crowd like a dry leaf swept away by the wind. Evelyn watched him go, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Not for him, but for the woman she used to be, for a painful past that was finally laid to rest. She turned and walked back toward the light where Alexander was waiting. He didn't ask. He just wrapped her in his arms and she knew she was home. With Julian gone from her life, Evelyn felt reborn. Her relationship with Alexander deepened into a quiet, stable love built on mutual respect and understanding. Finally, he felt it was time. "Come home with me this weekend for dinner," he said one evening. Evelyn froze. "To your home to meet your parents? Isn't it too soon? Will they accept me?" She worried, her past marriage weighing on her. Alexander squeezed her hand. "Don't worry. My parents are very easygoing. Besides," he said, his eyes full of love and confidence, "no one gets to veto the woman I choose." His certainty gave her courage. The Sterling family estate was not a lavish palace, but a tasteful historic mansion set in lush gardens, radiating a cultured calm that was the polar opposite of the cold Hayes estate. She was greeted at the door by a vibrant young woman who resembled Alexander. "You must be Evelyn. I'm Amelia, his sister. I've heard so much about you," she said, pulling Evelyn into a warm hug. His parents were just as welcoming. His father, the former chairman of the company, was stern-looking but had kind eyes. His mother was an elegant, beautiful woman with a gentle grace. Mrs. Sterling took her hand, her smile genuine. "Evelyn, dear Alexander has told us so much. You're even more lovely in person." The dinner was warm and cheerful. They never once mentioned her past, never spoke the name Julian Hayes. They talked about her design work, her hobbies, treating her with the warmth reserved for family. After dinner, Mrs. Sterling took Evelyn into the garden. "My dear," she said softly, "I'm sure you were very nervous, but the past does not define you. How you rise from it is what matters. I have followed the news about your brand, and I so admire your talent and resilience." She glanced toward Alexander, who was talking with his father. "My son has always been a quiet, reserved man. He has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. He has found the woman he truly wants to cherish and protect." She turned back to Evelyn, her eyes sincere. "Please take good care of my son." Mrs. Sterling's words a warm balm, soothing away all of Evelyn's remaining fears. Tears filled her eyes. She never imagined she would be accepted so completely. "I will, Mrs. Sterling. Thank you." On the drive home, Alexander held her hand. "See? I told you so." Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder, her heart full of peace. She had truly found her safe harbor, her family, her home. That night, after Alexander brought her back to her condo, he didn't leave. They sat on her balcony overlooking the glittering city. It was Evelyn who broke the silence. She turned to him, her eyes shining in the soft light, filled with a newfound certainty. "Alexander," she said softly. "Yes," he answered, his heart quickening. She took a deep breath. "Alexander Sterling, I accept your proposal. The simple words hit him with the force of an earthquake. He stared at her. Stunned. Evelyn smiled. A radiant, beautiful smile that erased all the shadows of her past. She placed a hand on his cheek. I've thought about it. I don't want to miss out on a man as wonderful as you. I want to be brave enough to love and be loved one more time. Overwhelmed with a joy so immense it was almost painful. Alexander said nothing. He simply leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss that held all the pent-up emotion of the years he had waited deep, passionate, and full of reverence. Evelyn kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck. In his kiss, she felt safety, protection, and the profound certainty that she had finally found where she belonged. When they broke apart, they rested their foreheads together. Evelyn, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Silly, she murmured, stroking his hair. I should be thanking you. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you for never giving up. That night, for the first time in years, Evelyn slept deeply, peacefully, wrapped in his arms. Her nightmares were gone, replaced by dreams of a future filled with sunlight and the warmth of the man beside her. To celebrate their new beginning, Alexander planned a surprise trip. Let's go on vacation, he said one morning, placing 2 plane tickets on the table. Santorini, Greece. It was a place she had always dreamed of seeing. The island was a paradise of sun-drenched white villas and the Aegean Sea. They stayed in a private villa overlooking the water, spending their days exploring the charming villages. Walking hand in hand, Alexander shed his corporate armor, becoming a relaxed, attentive boyfriend, taking photos of her, buying her little gifts. Evelyn, in her flowing sundresses, laughed like a carefree girl, all the sorrows of her past washed away by the sea. One evening, they watched the famous Oya sunset from a cliffside cafe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink, the world seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder, her heart overflowing. Alexander, she whispered, I feel like I'm in a dream. He wrapped his arm around her. This isn't a dream, he murmured, his lips brushing her hair. This is our reality. And from now on, every day will be this beautiful. On their last night, Alexander took her to a private rooftop restaurant, just one table set for 2 under a blanket of stars. The path was lined with white rose petals and flickering candles. A violinist played a soft romantic melody. Alexander, all of this. Evelyn was moved to tears. After a perfect dinner, he led her to the edge of the terrace. Evelyn, he said, his voice suddenly serious. He took a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. But what took her breath away was the design. It was one of her own. A sketch from her college notebook from 5 years ago. A design of a tiny sprout pushing its way out of the earth, symbolizing new life. This ring, she gasped. I've kept the image in my mind all this time, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I knew it wasn't just a drawing. It was you. Resilient, brilliant, always reaching for the light. He slowly knelt on one knee. Evelyn, I'm not a man of fancy words. I only know that meeting you was the greatest fortune of my life. Seeing you smile is my greatest happiness. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, protecting you. He held the ring up. Evelyn Reed, will you marry me? You don't have to hold up the sky. You just have to lean on me. His words echoed his promise from that first terrible night, now transformed into the most tender, heartfelt proposal. Tears of joy streamed down her face. She couldn't speak, only nod again and again, sobbing with pure happiness. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around under the starlit sky. I love you, Evelyn, he whispered. I love you too, Alexander, she answered, her voice choked, but certain. 3 months later, the wedding of the century took place in New York. The bride, in a breathtaking gown of her own design, walked down the aisle of a historic cathedral filled with white roses. She was no longer the sad, resigned Mrs. Hayes, but a radiant, glowing bride. walking toward her future. At the altar, Alexander waited, his eyes never leaving her, filled with an all-consuming love and adoration. Under the watchful eyes of God and their loved ones, they exchanged their vows. "I do," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "I do," she answered, her voice clear and filled with joy. They exchanged rings and shared a deep, loving kiss as applause thundered through the cathedral. At that same moment, in a dingy bar in a forgotten corner of the city, Julian Hayes sat alone, surrounded by empty bottles. The old television above the bar was broadcasting live from the wedding. He watched Evelyn, the woman he had so carelessly destroyed, now shining like a queen in another man's arms. Her smile, her happiness, they were daggers in his hollowed-out heart. He had lost her, truly lost her. He raised his glass, the bitter liquor no match for the regret that consumed him. This was his punishment. Later that night, Alexander carried his bride across the threshold of their new home. He gently laid her down on their bed, which was covered in rose petals. "Mrs. Sterling," he whispered, his forehead touching hers, "I look forward to your guidance. And you as well, Mr. Sterling," she laughed, her arms around his neck. He looked deep into her eyes, his voice filled with all the sincerity in the world. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me the chance to love you. The sun that shines after a storm is always the warmest and brightest."